I'm thrilled to be joined today on Manaw at the Table by Catherine O'Keefe, Ireland's first menopause coach and the powerhouse behind wellnesswarrior.ie. Catherine is a keynote speaker, author of All You Need to Know About Menopause, and the visionary founder of the Menopause Success Summit. With degrees from Trinity College Dublin, TU Dublin, and the Irish School of Homeopathy, she brings a wealth of knowledge and passion to this conversation. She is also a proud mom of three and a dedicated marathon runner. Catherine, we're so excited to have you with us today.
Thanks for inviting me, Martina. It's lovely to be on with you.
Yeah, Catherine, I'm a big fan, as you know, follow, all your postings on social media, and I'm super excited about this conversation today. And I know lots of our listeners are as well. So we've a lot to cover, so we're going to get right down to it. So, Catherine, if you could share with us today, what inspired you to become that leading voice for menopause awareness, and then take us through, the founding of Wellness Warrior.
So I guess really, we all have, we don't have a linear journey, right? It's a lot of curves along the way, and that would certainly be my journey. I was a director in investment banking for several years, over 20 years, and then perimenopause hit, and I was kind of in that environment where your cognitive function in particular is really important. I found that all of a sudden, I would have been a very confident person. I was very calm. I just felt, on top of my game, I guess. Then when perimenopause came in, it was like the rug was pulled from under me, and it was like anxiety, which I'd never experienced anxiety before. And I really found that disconcerting. And it was a bit like kind of, what's going on with me? And I was looking at, everything in my life, questioning everything. I had young kids, is it that? Is it burnout? Is it stress, etc.? But it was perimenopause. It was the start of perimenopause. And what I found at the time, nobody was talking about it. There was very few voices in Ireland who actually even knew at the time, back in 2014, what perimenopause actually meant. And even menopause itself just wasn't discussed. So it was really my own personal journey that led me to kind of like, why aren't we talking about this? And I know even a lot of my friends, Martina, the same age, they were like, no, we're too young to be talking about menopause. I would have been 43, 44 at the time. But I was like, no, we're not, because perimenopause can start around that time. And then as I started to, look into it more, I was just like, this is ridiculous that there's nobody talking about it. And that really started my whole journey, where I started advocacy work, in relation to with the Department of Health, the Women's Task Force. I was part of that to kind of really give it a voice in terms of putting menopause front and center on the table. So that, as you can imagine, things don't happen overnight. There was several years in that, all kind of culminating to menopause now is mainstream in the media. It's, people don't really blink now when they see it on a headline or they see an article in the papers. But that took a lot of time. It took several years, and it was really, I would say probably 2017, 2020, about 2017, that's where the conversation started to drip into mainstream media. So at that time as well, I was very fortunate. I got the opportunity to take voluntary redundancy from the bank, and I took that. I had a year or two at home with the kids, but then I was blogging, I was doing everything in the background. And it was kind of as a result of that Wellness Warrior was born. And, it came, I guess, from my passion about health, because it's something I've always been just hugely passionate about. And then really with the focus on being on women's health.
Okay, great, Catherine. And it's because of your work now that, as you said, people don't really blink an eye now when we hear the word, menopause or perimenopause. So maybe if we could zone in on that a little bit, Catherine, and if you could talk about the difference between perimenopause and menopause.
Yeah, and I still find I do a lot of work in workplaces, and it's the one area that I still find there's ambiguity, or there's misconception around the timeline of menopause. So if we start, you've three key phases around menopause. Anywhere, any conversation, the word menopause is used really as a catch-all. It's an umbrella term, but that breaks down into three distinct stages: perimenopause, menopause, and what's very, very important is post-menopause. So if we start at perimenopause, the average age is 45, but I was younger, and we're definitely seeing now women are starting to go into perimenopause younger. So it can be the early 40s, it can be the late 30s. In perimenopause, what starts to happen, I always use the analogy of a mountain. So in perimenopause, the hormones start to decline very, very steadily. So progesterone starts first, and that's where we see what happens. All of a sudden, anxiety, you may have never had it before, sleep goes out of kilter. Maybe your confidence gets a little bit wobbly, or you're just you just don't feel like yourself. And I think that's probably in thousands of conversations I've had over the years with so many women. It's that decline in the early perimenopause years that's really scary. And you're really kind of like, God, what's going on with me? What's happening? And if you don't really understand the hormonal decline, that is scary, because you're wondering, am I depressed? Am I down? What's going on with my life? So perimenopause is that gradual decline of the hormones, progesterone a key one, but then estrogen on top of that. And estrogen impacts every part of our body. It's that vitality, where progesterone is calming, estrogen is, it gives us the energy, it gives us the spark. So when the two of those start to decline and fluctuate, which estrogen does, estrogen's like a roller coaster. It'll have peaks and troughs as you go through the perimenopause years. And that's where the symptoms get thrown out, because the body is like, what's going on here? These lovely, juicy hormones I was getting on a regular basis, where are they gone? And that really throws the body off kilter. Now, we can also mention testosterone, but what's important about testosterone is that testosterone starts to decline much earlier, and that's for both men and women. So testosterone is declining, but it has been declining already. So that's just an important distinction to make. So if you go back and you think of the mountain analogy, so in those early stages, it's like you're climbing up to reach menopause. And that's perimenopause, where the symptoms gradually start to show or appear. That's if you're going to have symptoms. I was talking just at the weekend, we were out with some friends, and one of the partners was saying to me, Catherine, she's 57, and she was like saying, I've had no symptoms. I was like, you're so lucky. But we know about 20 to 25% of women do go through with no symptoms. So they're the lucky ones.
That's for sure, Catherine.
Big time. But they do exist. Like, I would say for every workplace talk I do, I'll always meet someone in the audience who's basically, that's me, I haven't had symptoms. But so it's not a foregone conclusion you're going to have all of these symptoms. So perimenopause is that kind of, that edging towards menopause. But really, menopause itself, it's only one day. It's the anniversary of 12 months without a menstrual cycle, without a period. So really, it's like an anniversary of sorts. And then you're into post-menopause. So if you think about it, peri and post, they're equally as important to each other. And the reason for that is in perimenopause, the symptoms might be ramping up. Menopause, that tick box, you've hit it, 12 months, and then you have to come down off the mountain. So, for example, the average age of menopause is 51. Now, that will differ based on ethnic background as well. But if I went into menopause at the age of 51, I'd probably have another 5-6 years before it'll all calm down and all of the symptoms will taper off. So it could be 55, 56. before the body goes into complete status quo and it's comfortable with the new level of hormones that are now there. So that journey from perimenopause all the way through to starting postmenopause can be anywhere from 4 to 10 to 12 years. It's hugely individual. I always kind of say no two people will have the same experience of menopause. And then, of course, when you look at that timeline, it's really important to also understand that's natural, spontaneous menopause. But there are many different types of menopause. And it's really important to understand that, because you can have very early menopause, premature ovarian insufficiency, that can happen from adolescence up. So from the age of 12, 13, and that's a type of menopause year on year is on the increase. It can also unfortunately be as a result of surgery, generally as due to cancer. And that can bring you into cliff edge menopause. And I always kind of say natural, spontaneous menopause is a privilege, because when we look at the other types of menopause, early forms of menopause, they do generally come with far more intense symptoms. I've only met one woman out of hundreds who went through surgical menopause and had no symptoms. That wouldn't be the norm. The majority of women will experience intense symptoms. So there's different types of menopause as well that can come into play. But the journey, it's very individual. Every single person will have a different experience, and that's why I'm very passionate around respect in the menopause conversation, because you and I could have a completely different experience. That means our management options, how we support ourselves, will be completely different. And just because it works maybe for your best friend, your sister, your mom, etc., it doesn't mean it will work for you. It's really important to stay true to yourself and kind of, look at how you're responding, how your body is responding physically, mentally, emotionally, etc., and then look at the supports you need to really ensure that you're supporting yourself through this chapter. Because it's long, it's really important we have the right supports in place.
Yeah, I mean, it is a long time frame, Catherine, 4 to 12 years. And you talk about women are going into, perimenopause earlier. So, I mean, is there anything our 20-year-olds that are listening, can do to, I guess, prepare their body?
That's a really good question. And what I would say there, and because obviously from a women's health perspective, I talk to a lot of women around fertility, menstrual health as well. One thing that's really important, we're in a changing world now in relation to fertility. And unfortunately, we know that fertility isn't the given that it was maybe 20, 30 years ago. Or maybe it also is, probably part of that is the fact we talk more openly in that now about fertility issues. There starting to be more conversations around miscarriages, etc. What I would say, I think it is very important from your 20s onwards to understand your hormones. And the start of that is understanding your menstrual cycle. There's huge power behind understanding your individual menstrual cycle, because at different stages of your cycle, your body is telling you different things. It's telling you what you need. If you come to the middle of your cycle and you're feeling exhausted, well, you shouldn't be. At the middle of your cycle, estrogen would be peaking. You should be feeling energetic. But if you're feeling exhausted, that's going to tell you, okay, what's going on here? Maybe you're low in iron, maybe there's B12 deficiency, maybe there's something else going on. So understanding hormones in the menstrual cycle is a fantastic lead in to then being equipped to really understand perimenopause when it starts. And, I think for many women in their early 20s and indeed into their early 30s, their heads may not be in the space of thinking about perimenopause, because it may be that they're in a fertility journey, maybe they're not, maybe they're just not even thinking about it. Where you really do want to start thinking about it, I think, is really when you get to, your late 30s, because it's definitely, many women are showing symptoms in the early 40s. So it's really good to kind of know what that can look like, so that you're not going to be caught unawares and you're not going to be wondering, geez, what's going on with me? When it could be really simple that, okay, you're starting perimenopause. What is important though, when it comes to that, it's really important to rule out any other underlying conditions. I have met many women in their late 30s, early 40s, who will kind of say to me, "Oh, I'm definitely in perimenopause." And I might say, "Okay, have you spoke to your doctor? Have you had your bloods done?" And maybe they haven't had the bloods done in quite a while. And then it might be the thyroid is out of balance. As I said, iron deficiency is really common, particularly if you're having heavy periods. B12 deficiency is going to make you feel exhausted. It's going to impact your hormones. Vitamin D deficiency is also going to impact. So I always kind of say, if you're late 30s, early 40s, you want to rule out any other underlying condition first.
Okay, okay. I think then it also shows, Catherine, listening to your body and really knowing your body.
Oh, so important. And that's why, like, I would even find, like, even coming into perimenopause, many women still may not fully understand the menstrual cycle and the different stages of it. So there's great power in understanding. If you break the menstrual cycle into four parts, each part is going to tell you what's going on with your overall health. You really can think of it like a vital sign, because you can tell something from every part of that cycle. And also, depending on whether you're having challenges at different stages of the cycle, might indicate PMDD, endometriosis, PCOS. It could be indicated there are other things there that need attention.
And Catherine, I know you have really done a lot of work in bringing the topic of menopause into the workplace. I mean, we spend so many of our hours, in the workplace. Did you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Mm. Yeah, look, I think, menopause, it has no boundaries, right? So it's not going to stop when you rock up at your desk, or, the office floor, wherever. So it impacts all aspects of our lives. And yes, we all know it can be really challenging at home, particularly when we look at the psychological aspects of menopause. And, the majority of women will always say, give me a hot flush any day over the psychological aspects of menopause, because they are so challenging. The rage, the frustration, the anxiety, and then the brain fog. They're really challenging to manage in a home setting where we're comfortable and we can control the environment. But you transfer that into the workplace where maybe you don't have the same controls. You can't change the heating if it's, based on building, air conditioning, etc. Maybe you can't take the breaks when you want to take the breaks. Things like that really impact. So understanding menopause in the workplace is crucial, because from my perspective, from an employer's perspective, you're not just supporting the woman going through menopause, it's the family unit. Because when you support a woman going through this chapter of your life, you're committed to a long-term career. Most women want to stay in their careers. They like their careers, they like their jobs. And particularly as you get older, you tend to move around to get to where, okay, I'm happy here, I like my job, I'm happy with, my colleagues, etc. And think of all the wisdom and experience that's garnered by the time you come to the perimenopause age. So it's really important that we kind of hold space and we support women through this chapter. And that has to be everybody. It has to be people going through menopause and also colleagues as well, because everyone is part of the journey. And that's where the education and awareness sessions are so important, because there's so many aspects to menopause, and often, maybe people just don't fully understand it. They mightn't understand the symptoms and how they can look at work. I did a menopause in the workplace survey, and the top 5 symptoms women reported as impacting in their workday. Number one was brain fog. So your cognitive function, memory, concentration. And like we all know how impactful that is. It really impacts your confidence and your self-esteem if you can't remember things. And it's disconcerting. So that was number one. Number two was anxiety. And I remember myself when I was in the bank, like I could not understand, where is this anxiety coming from? I was over preparing for meetings, for events, etc. I never had to do that before. And that again will impact how you think about yourself, and it chips away at your confidence unless you're supporting yourself. The impact on confidence and self-esteem was another one. Sleep issues, very, very big. And the fifth one was aches and pains. And, I think the majority of women will say at some stage, they feel like a 90-year-old getting out of bed. It is that the aches and pains, and and it's not that you've run a marathon or that you've done extensive exercise. It's basically you just wake up and you're it takes a while to get out of the bed. So that's 5 symptoms. There's another 45 plus symptoms of menopause, and I would argue they all have an impact in the workplace. And that's why it's so important that we support in the workplace. And plus two, if we start this conversation, it means the generation coming behind us are going to be in a really good position when it comes to supporting society in their work, etc. Because if we look at it, the fastest growing demographic currently in the workplace are women in the perimenopause to postmenopause age category. So it's kind of a no-brainer that this needs to be on agendas.
Because you're really at the height of your career during those years. And I guess to keep on the workforce topic, Catherine, we've so many men in leadership positions. That could be a whole other conversation. But how can they be better allies for us during perimenopause, menopause?
I think that's really being part of the conversations. Like I would find now most sessions that I do, there's always men will come to the education sessions. And that's really important because men are an integral part of this journey. So it's really showing up. It's showing up at sessions. It's being a champion of menopause. It's openly in a positive light talking about menopause support in the workplace. Look, if we look at a lot of the case law around menopause, a lot of it hinges on derogatory comments, things like that have been made. Does it still exist? I'm not living in a bubble. I know, unfortunately, it does still happen. But I think really where men can champion is to kind of break that cycle and just make sure that we're having a conversation around women's health and perimenopause into postmenopause with respect.
Yeah. And the importance of, just as you said, Catherine, just continuing that conversation, so we are paving the way and having an easier path for the next generation coming along. And I think back to my own mother. All we heard, and probably you too, Catherine, we just heard about the hot flashes. They didn't. There was,
Yeah.
I never heard my mother talk about anxiety or brain fog.
Yeah, but like my mum would have gone through surgical menopause, and I can tell you, I'd say she knew nothing because I'm sure nobody told her after she'd had a full hysterectomy what was going to happen. And I can certainly remember her having a lot of hot flashes. But look, thankfully, we're talking about it now, which like the generation, our mother's generations, they got zero support. So at least now that has changed and is changing.
And for the better, thank goodness. So, Catherine, in your introduction, you talked, about progesterone and estrogen, and you're based in Ireland, and I'm here in the US. So I'd love if you could talk a little bit about kind of Ireland, versus United States, and what's going on with regards to legislation. I know there was a big announcement in Ireland around in June of 2020 this year around HRT.
Mm. So I think the global platform is so interesting. I have a lot of friends in many different countries now, thanks to menopause, which is great. And it's really interesting to see the dynamic changing and evolving in different countries. If you look at it, the UK has been spearheading the menopause conversation for quite some time. And I think in Ireland, we're closely aligned to, a lot of what happens in the UK. Our population, yes, it's a lot smaller, but tends to be pretty similar. So I think we certainly have been able to kind of piggyback, I guess, off of a lot of great work that has been done in the UK. But we're definitely, I think now we're gone on a little bit of our own journey. And I always kind of think, the UK is definitely leading the field. We've come up quite fast behind it. We've probably we did a little bit more about 2 years ago in terms of we did a national awareness campaign around menopause, which I know is something they're still calling for in the UK. So that was fantastic to see. And certainly, that's something we need to keep doing. It's not a one-off task. If we look at it then from the US perspective, and maybe even if I just talk North America, so I would kind of see Canada as being a little bit ahead of the US in terms of conversations. And I would know some of the Canadian advocates who've been there for quite a number of years. I think in the US, it's really the last 18 months where you've really started to, open up that conversation around menopause. And I guess now, you can see there's a huge amount of celebrities coming on board with that, which is great to bring awareness. My personal conundrums I have around that is when they're bringing awareness and then they're also bringing a product. So that to me is a little bit, I don't know, it just doesn't sit well with me, I'll be honest, but it happens. So, I think your journey is just starting in the US. And, I can see the journey my colleagues in the UK have gone on, and I can see how they look at us and they're, oh, we were there. And they're like, yeah, okay, we know what's going to happen next. I look at the US now and I'm completely thinking the same thing, and the same things are happening. So I think the long and the short of it is bringing awareness to this chapter in a woman's life is crucial. So this is where it's really important to go underneath the headlines and really empower yourself and, look at the evidence behind anything. Because one thing I always say is it's your menopause, it's your body, and nobody knows your body as well as you do. Nobody can say to you, oh, Catherine, I think you're a bit anxious, or oh, I think have you a bit of frustration there or something. Nobody knows you. You know yourself better than anybody else. And this is why being empowered with evidence-based information so that you can really set yourself up on a really positive experience of menopause, get all of the supports in place that work for you so that then you actually take the best from this chapter. Because I know it can be challenging. I've been there. I've sat in a restaurant where I flooded out due to a heavy period. I've sat in a boardroom where brain fog has hit me and I've lost every single piece of information. I've lost my car numerous times because I don't remember where I parked it. I totally get it. On the other side of that, though, every time something happens to me, I turn it into curiosity. And as humans, we don't like change. So it's really important that we become comfortable we change. So if you think about it, menopause is really, it's pushing all our buttons, and it's basically saying, okay, I'm going to make you feel uncomfortable. I'm going to, I'll bring up all this stuff that maybe you didn't deal with before. Past trauma resurfaces in menopause if we haven't dealt with it. So I'm going to shake the boat. I'm going to churn all this stuff out. I'm going to ask you to reflect, to deal with it, to look at your life and look at what your needs are. What supports do you need? And then I'm going to kind of shake you off, and you're going to come out of it, and you're going to be a stronger, firmer, more confident person. Just this week, I'm decluttering our attic, which is a monstrous task. But
Do you want to come and do mine?
yeah, oh my God, like, oh. And one of my sons, like my three sons are doing it with me, and one is like, no, be ruthless, bin it. And I'm like, oh, I remember this, bin it. Anyway, I was going through loads of photos from when I was in college and old journals and everything. I was looking at some of the photos, and I remember back, and I'm like thinking, I wasn't 100% comfortable in my skin in my 20s. And I'm looking at myself, and I'm like, I was a size 8. I had a great career. I had great friends, but I know I was not as comfortable in my skin as I am today. So, I was thinking, if I was to write a letter back, be the one thing, just be comfortable in your skin. If I could give the wisdom I have now back to myself 30 years ago, it's something so powerful. But look, that only comes with years and experience and whatnot. But menopause is a deeply psychological chapter in a person's life. If you look at the symptoms, the psychological symptoms alone, that's enough to throw anyone off kilter. And we often find, and it's one thing I talk about a lot in the workplace is, we can see hot flushes, we can see incidents of brain fog, but we don't see anxiety, we don't see rage that's suppressed, we don't see frustration that you're trying to keep a lid on, we don't see the low moods if someone's trying to hide it. And that's why, understanding the psychological is so important, because otherwise you'll just feel, what's wrong with me? And there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. Your hormones are declining. Your body is trying to figure out what's going on, and it's trying to get it all to settle down. There's nothing wrong with you. And the other thing is, you're not alone. We're all going through the same thing at different stages and having a different experience.
And I suppose too, Catherine, for women to not to be afraid to put their hand up and say, I'm not okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. The number of side conversations I've had with women, and your heart breaks because they don't have the right support. They, maybe are afraid to talk about what they're experiencing. They're even afraid themselves particularly again, when we look at the psychological, they can just be afraid if you've never had anger before, if you've never felt rage before, and all of a sudden it starts to come in, that is so scary. It's so scary. And the amount of women who would just be like, I don't know why I'm like this. I don't know what's happening me. And then, of course, as women, we tend to load on the guilt. So it's like maybe you've kids, and maybe you get cross, and you're like kind of, I don't know what's wrong with me, and I got cross with my kids, and now guilt comes in, and all of a sudden you're putting more of a burden on yourself, and it becomes a vicious cycle. It's really important to be compassionate. I do a lot of work with women around weight management and well-being in menopause. And one of the things, every single session we start, I always talk about compassion. And it's, we have to come from a place of compassion in menopause.
For someone, Catherine, that's listening today and that's, struggling with the weight loss, can't sleep, what little lifestyle change could they
Yeah.
start to implement?
I think if we take weight,
Mm.
it's
I know we talk about it from
it's
teenage right up to.
there's so much to it. And here's another thing. I go back to what I was saying earlier. I'm looking at those pictures. I was a size 8. I can't remember exactly, but I remember I did cabbage soup diets back then in my 20s. What was I at? What was I at?
Oh,
And I look at my body now, and I'm probably, I don't know, I'm a 12, I'd say. I don't really pay too much attention to it, but I am so comfortable in my body. And yes, I have handles, and yes, things are sagging, but it doesn't get in on me. So I think the weight is very emotive, and I think there's many different parts of that conversation. I think a very important part of it is being comfortable with the fact it's okay. Our body is going to change. There are so many things we can do to support ourselves as we get older, but it's just having again that compassion to understand my body's going to change and being okay with that. What we do want to do is we do want to make sure that when we look at weight, that yes, we are managing it from a perspective of other conditions that it might impact, but also what's really important now is our bone health. So it's bringing in movement that will support weight, but at the same time, it's going to support bones. So, because fractures, bone health really impacts kind of from our 40s onwards. And if you've early menopause, again, it's going to impact. So the weight conversation really, to me, is more about a lifestyle conversation. And I always say to women that I work with, this isn't about, in 3 months' time, you're going to drop a size that, this is more about, I want to make sure you've optimum health for your 70s, 80s, and 90s. So everything we do in our weeks together, it's all about making sure we're focusing on your bone health, your heart health, your psychological, your mental and emotional health, and at the same time, addressing weight concerns that you might have. One of the first steps I would say to anyone who's on a weight journey is really looking at evening time snacking. It's the biggest challenge for women as we get older. You come home from work, you put your feet up on the couch, turn on Netflix, you're like, you've had a mad day, maybe the kids are in bed or whatever, and you think, okay, I need a little reward here. The glass of wine, the crisps, the chocolate, whatever comes out. But that little reward, that's where, if you can start to tweak that, if you can maybe look at, okay, maybe I go for a healthier reward, and maybe I have that healthier reward earlier in the night. But as I said, there's many other aspects to bring in. And another thing, just we were talking earlier, about messaging, social media, etc. I think we have to be very careful. There are celebrities out there who probably do at least one personal training session a day, if not two. They may have bodies of maybe some of us when we were younger. We do not need to look like that when we come to our 50s. And I think that message needs to change, because it's understanding that we can be any shape or size. It's all about being content and comfortable in your body. That's what's important. So that's what I would say in terms of weight. I talk a lot about weight, and there'll be, on my social media, I'll be doing a lot in August, so
Okay.
they can tune into that. In relation to sleep, so sleep is all about routine, and it's really the starting point there is good sleep habits. So I piggyback off of what I said earlier, and I would look at the evening snacking. it's really important to have a gap between when you last eat and when you last go to bed. And you know the way we say don't have a meal like within 2 to 3 hours.
Yes.
You know, you want to have that gap before you go to bed. So you want the body to pretty much be empty. So that then the body, when you put your head in the pillow, is like, okay, beautiful. I love it. You know, I'm going to bring the cleaners in. I'm going to rest. I'm going to repair some damage here. I'm going to restore. The body loves sleep because that's when it does everything. Now, the biggest challenge we have, biggest two challenges, might be night sweats or it's worry, it's anxiety. The nighttime is worry time. That's when you wake up, you're ping, every worry floods into your head. So you might find you put your head in the pillow at 10, 11 at night and bang, you're gone to sleep in seconds. But I guarantee you, it could be 2, 3 in the morning, bing, you're wide awake. It's the email list, the to-do list, the worries come flooding in. And if you keep them coming in, well, good luck, because it's going to be really challenging to get back to sleep. So what you really need to do there is you want to break that cycle. So if that is what's happening, that's kind of telling you there's cortisol, there's excess cortisol. So it's going back to that wind down routine and it's really setting yourself up. No screens at least 60 to 90 minutes before the lights go out. And I mean social media, Netflix, nothing for at least 60 minutes. Maybe read a book, something very easy. Invest in sleep. Sleep gives you energy. So it's worth investing in, you know. And the other thing, you know, I would kind of say is like look at your bedclothes because a lot of the ingredients can trigger and make night sweats worse. So, you know, make sure it's cotton, bamboo, that's going to, you know, be easier if you're having night sweats. But, you know, one of the biggest challenge I would probably say for women, it is the anxiety, the worry, the increased cortisol. So bring that down. You know, a bit of meditation. Actually, even what's really nice is pull out your yoga mat or on the carpet, do about 5 minutes of stretching, just stretching before you go to bed. If you do wake up 2, 3 in the morning and you're desperately trying to get back to sleep, but sleep is really important. I always kind of say it's the bedrock of thriving through menopause because if you can get sleep right, then it has a domino impact on everything else.
Yeah. And, you know, we've had a lot of talk here in the US about sleep hygiene or wind down routine. So you've really just reinforced forced that for us, Catherine. And
Yeah.
Catherine,
And I think just to mention, Martina, on the sleep too, I mean, you know, I think you can have the best sleep hygiene
mm,
in place, like, you know, the blackout blinds, the
mhm,
wind down, etc. But you have to make it specific to you now
yeah,
in menopause because you could be doing all of that, but if you were having night sweats, none of
right.
that's going to really
True.
help, you know. And it's the same like with the anxiety piece. You kind so don't be afraid thinking you're ticking all these boxes, but yet it's not working. Just remember, menopause is different. It's throwing up different symptoms for everyone. So you know, I think I sometimes feel with the sleep hygiene, we can nearly get a bit exhausted by that as a kind of a, you know, an umbrella for everything. Whereas you just have to isolate it more for menopause. And just to mention too, one big symptom that comes up for many women that interferes with sleep is restless leg syndrome. Very, very common. One of the easiest cures for restless leg syndrome is magnesium citrate. If you start taking magnesium citrate, you generally find within a couple of days the restless legs will stop.
And I guess just to before we finish up, Catherine, you know, the magnesium and there's so many brands out there. So how do you decide, you know,
Mhm.
this is the,
Yeah.
you know, the brand for me, or this is the brand that's not full of all
Oh,
chemicals.
oh my God,
Yeah,
that's another head wreck
I
I
know.
find. Menopause, it's now $1 billion industry, several billions now. And, you know, there are some fantastic brands. And in Ireland, thankfully, we've some very, very good brands. but equally there are some not so good brands. It's really important to read your ingredients. With magnesium, there's about 9 or 10 different forms of magnesium. So some of them, they're just not going to do what you want them to do. The two best magnesiums in menopause, magnesium citrate, which is very good for restless leg syndrome to calm the nervous system, can help with sleep, or magnesium biglycinate. It's sometimes called magnesium glycinate or magnesium biglycinate. And that's very good for sleep. So I always kind of say magnesium citrate is cheaper. So I kind of say start with magnesium citrate, because if that works for you, then you don't need to go to magnesium biglycinate. But that is a sleep one. So just kind of isolate it that way. It's primarily for sleep. Other magnesiums that are there, magnesium L-threonate, it's much more expensive. That crosses the blood-brain barrier, so it has more of an impact on your brain. I think that's more widely available in the US than it is here in Ireland. Not popular here. And the other thing I would say is don't go and buy 50 million different supplements. Please just buy one. Buy one at a time. Make sure it's working. It does something for you before you start adding other things in, because then you don't know what's happening. You don't know what's helping. And that's where, I've seen so many women who come with bags of supplements, and you ask them, what is that helping? I don't know. So supplements are expensive. So just take the time to look at the ingredients, read past the marketing. The marketing on Google, on any website, is going to be amazing. You need to read past it into the ingredients. And particularly if you're getting more individual and you're looking, say like something like ashwagandha, then there's one type of ashwagandha that's the creme de la creme, and that's KSM 66. So that's what you want in your ingredient list. And then you want to look at therapeutic dose. So if it's 10 milligrams, well, that's not going to do much for you. So again, you have to look at dosage and be careful too, because sometimes you might get something that is 30 capsules, but it might say you take 6 a day.
Wow.
I'm just saying it's really important.
No, I agree. And we said that at the very beginning of the conversation, listening to your body, and it's not this one size fits all. Well, Catherine, this has been an absolute fabulous conversation. Thank you for continuing to shine the light on a very important topic. And I would just ask before we finish, what do you do to take care of yourself? Because you're taking care of all of us with such wonderful information every day, and we really do look up to you.
Oh, thank you, Martina. I guess, look, the mountains is my big thing. When I need escape, when I just need to get away from it all, I put the boots on, I go up with the dog. And that I'm very lucky. I'm a 5-minute drive from the Dublin Mountains. So that's my go-to. But, I exercise every day, either walking the dog, doing my weight, strength training, all of that. I do eat. I eat well. I fall off the wagon. I love treats. I love ice cream. And when that happens, I do it with compassion. I don't beat myself up. It's kind of, look, I guess I'm very, very lucky. I love the work that I do, and it also allows me to kind of bring all the tools to live my best life,
All right. Thank you so much, Catherine.
Thanks for having me, Martina.